Okay, let's get started. We're gonna go over lab. We're still doing lab 7, and now we're gonna do the last part of lab 7, which I'm gonna share screens here, which is the online version of exercise 7 in the lab manual, and it's called Exploring the Pelvis, pages 73 to 74 in the 6th edition. So there's different parts to it. It says A, label the parts of the pelvis on the top and bottom drawings on page 74. Fill in the boxes with the following measurements. The label of the pelvis is adult female. The ilium breadth means width, is 128 millimeters, and ilium height is 103, and so on. So what's an ilium? What's happening here? So you're probably going, what's an ilium? So let's go figure out what an ilium is. So my next going to share screens, and I'm going to show you a PDF file of that page 73. So it's exercise 7.3, exploring the pelvis. So what do we got to do here? It says the pelvis is composed of 3 separate units. The left os coxa, also called the innominate. You don't need to know that for this class. Nobody uses that word as far as I know. The right os coxa, and then the sacrum. Well, there's another little part called the coccyx, but we'll get that in a moment. So your mission, if you choose to do it, which you have to finish this lab, is label the 3 parts of a pelvis. Here's your left os coxa, your right, excuse me, that's your right os coxa, because it's the pelvis is right. This is the left os coxa. And then this is the sacrum. The sacrum is kind of at the terminus of the vertebral column. And then at the very bottom or distal end of the sacrum is an internal tailbone called a coccyx. Okay, so let's move back up here. How do you spell os coxa? O-S space C-O-X-A. Sacrum, S-A-C-R-U-M. What's not shown here is a coccyx. So I guess you don't have to worry about that because it's not in this lab manual, but it should be there. Feel free to look up coccyx. It's C-O-C-C-Y-X, I think. Oh, I'm the world's worst speller. So you may want to look that up. All right, now each os coxa. So os coxa is where the hip bones are. So your pelvis is like made out of 3 major bones, adults. Right? There's the center bone where your vertebral column terminates. And then there's the right side, which is shaded on the picture of the lab manual, and the left side. So the sides of the pelvis are called the os coxae, but each one is an os coxa. So O-S space C-O-X-A. Now, when you are born, any newborn human, is born, each os coxa is in 3 different sections. So 3 different sections. And so those sections, after they fuse together into one bone, still are named 3 different names. And those 3 different sections are the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. So the ilium is I-L-I-U-M, and the ilium is the top part of the os coxa that looks like a cresting wave. So it's a big curve. So if you look at your screen, the top of the os coxa down to the edge of the acetabulum is called the ilium. Hold on a second. I'm the best husband in the world. Look what he bought me. Yay. I'll eat that later. Okay, where are we? So when you're labeling your pelvis, this is the right os coxa, this is the left os coxa if you're looking at the screen, this is the sacrum, this is a little coccyx down here. Now we're going to talk about the 3 sections of each os coxa. So I'm just going to work on the right section. The top part is called the ilium. And it ends at the top edge of this crater round protuberance. That's called the acetabulum, which I will talk about later. So that top part is called the ilium. The bottom part, where your hip bones are, so these are your hip bones, or your sit bones, called the ischium. They get sore when you ride a mountain bike or any kind of bicycle, if you ride a horse, if you haven't ridden for a while. So they get super sore. So those are called your ischium. How do you spell that? Oh, world's worst speller here. Ischium. I should know that. I'm doing this for years. It's pathetic. And so notice where that a pelvis is a three-dimensional thing. It's kind of hard to show in the drawing, but it does curve like a big bowl. And the front part of it, see these big holes here? Abductor foramen. You remember foramen means hole? The front part is the pubis. So that's the pubis. Okay, so there's three parts to each os coxa: the top ilium, the bottom ischium, and the front pubis. So let me show you on pelvis. So cool, they let me borrow these. All right, so here's a pelvis. A little bit later, I'll go over how to tell the difference between a male and female pelvis. So notice that it is a bowl shape. A human pelvis is bowl shape. And so this is the anterior view. Rotate it. And this is the, this is the superior view. I'm sorry. This is superior view, right? What's superior? The top. This is the top looking down. I'm going to rotate it. This is the anterior view. So notice the picture in the lab manual. And it says, you are viewing this pelvis from the, okay, superior view. Rotate it. That is the anterior. Anterior means front. I'll rotate it around to the right. That's the lateral view. You can see the sciatic notch thing there, which was really important in sex determination. And then the posterior view is the sacrum. All right, so now we're going to label the different features of the pelvis. We put in the anterior view is the position of the pelvis in the middle of page 74 with a picture, three drawings of pelvi. That'd be plural for pelvises. All right, now the bottom drawings say what view, what side of the body is this os coxa from? It's the same one, just two different perspectives. What view? So number 2 is what view, number 3. I'll get to those in a moment. But before I get to those, let's label all the different features of a pelvis on the top drawing of a complete pelvis. So do you remember the 3 sections of each os coxa? The top is the ilium. The bottom is ischium, where your sit bones are. And then the front is the pubis. So let's look at the bottom of page 73, and I want you guys to write the location of these words in bold, the left column and the right column. And we'll begin with the left column and the iliac crest. So one way I like to think of a femur is that, not femur, did I say femur? Pelvis, of a pelvis, man, I'm really tired. Of a pelvis is, this is an os coxa, this is the left os coxa. And to me, this looks kind of like a wave, maybe because I'm more of a beach person, but this is like a wave. And so waves crest. And so this is called the iliac crest. So iliac, they just use the word ilium, right? Because this whole top part is the ilium. Iliac is like making an adjective out of the noun ilium. So you could, this is an ilium crest or iliac crest. Both are correct. So this is an iliac crest, the top edge. The next word on the bottom of 73, the next feature is the posterior superior iliac spine. So what's posterior mean? The back. Superior means the front. So it's the back part of the iliac crest that is just posterior to the sacrum. So this is the posterior superior iliac crest, so the back part of the iliac crest, right? This is the posterior of the pelvis, the back of the pelvis. So this is the posterior superior iliac spine. The next feature is the greater sciatic notch. Watch my finger on the screen, and it's that big notch on the lateral side or on each os coxa on either side of the sacrum on the back of the pelvis. And that is the posterior superior, or excuse me, the greater sciatic notch. Now notice this, the shape of this notch. How would you describe this shape? To me, it reminds me of the dental arcade on a human. It's like a parabola. So it's not really, it's rounded, and it's not really a U because either side is not parallel. And this is an indicator of a female pelvis in that you have this rounded U-shape sciatic notch that's really wide, and each side or wall is not parallel. They're kind of drifting away from each other. Let me show you a male pelvis. Here's a male pelvis, the same lateral view on the left side. Whoa, notice that its greater sciatic notch is like a V. It's much more narrow than the female. I'm gonna hold the pelvis female in my left hand and notice how different the notches are. Whoa, it's really wide. It's almost 90 degrees. Here, let me put it in it's a little tilt in the anatomical position. So the male is in my right hand. I'm shaking it right now, and know how narrow that sciatic notch is. And the female, now I'm shaking it on camera, know how wide that sciatic notch is. Okay. So that's a greater sciatic notch on the female, bouncing it up and down now on the camera, and then the male. Okay, so I'm going to put the female pelvis now, and now I'm going to show you the acetabulum. The acetabulum is a crater-shaped divot, so it's a round divot, and it's a socket that the head of the femur connects to, right? So that's an acetabulum, and I put it on the wrong side. So I'm gonna put my male female, why do I keep saying femur? My male pelvis down, been a long day. My female pelvis, and here's my female femur. You see? So the acetabulum is the socket for the ball and socket joint of when the femur articulates with the pelvis. So I think the proper term is articulates, but if you can say connect, it's fine. Articulates, right? So typically when someone breaks their hip, sometimes they may break the head of their femur off that connects to their hip, or they may crack their ilium. Either way, it's horribly painful. And one thing to be aware of, especially with grandma and grandpa and your elderly family members, is it's typical for elderly, if they don't exercise a lot, they don't walk, they just stay at home and do work, you know, they don't really have time to work out or don't work out, is that they may get osteoporosis. The bone gets really thin in their hips, and they, if they fall, something that, you know, you might bounce back up and go, whatever, get right up off, it could fracture their pelvis, and that's just awful. So yeah, so our elders get pretty fragile up in this area, especially in their late 70s and 80s and 90s. And you just, grandma's not allowed to fall, you know, not allowed to fall. Too painful. All right, so let me put, all right. So next, so I talked about the greater sciatic notch. There you go, the lateral view. I'm holding the female pelvis again. The acetabulum, acetabulum, is where the femur connects. And then we have the anterior superior iliac spine. So remember the posterior superior, so that's the back top. Anterior superior is the front top. So this is the anterior superior iliac spine, right? So it's right this corner in this edge. This whole thing is the iliac crest. And this top part is the anterior superior. And this bottom part is the posterior superior over here that I'm showing on the screen. Okay. So the anterior superior iliac spine is along the front top of the hip bone. So it's kind of what you feel when you feel your hips. Okay. All right. So those are all the features in the left column on the bottom of page 72. So now I'm going to start on the features on the right column, the bottom of 73, sorry. And you'll be labeling these on page 74. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So anterior, inferior iliac spine. Okay, interior means front, inferior, so front underneath iliac spine. So this is very short in humans, but in chimpanzees and monkeys, it's really long because they have very tall iliums. But in humans, it's very short and it's kind of like S-shaped. Okay, so interior, inferior iliac spine is the front part of the pelvis underneath that cresting wave structure of your hip bone called the iliac or ilium, sorry. So interior, inferior is kind of under, like when the wave crests. So if you're in the ocean, if you're body surfing, swimming, or if you have a surfboard, you would duck. It's called duck dive. You dive underneath this wave so it doesn't throw you over. All right, so that's interior, inferior iliac spine, and that's going to be important later in this class when we compare the pelvises of humans and apes, because apes is super long. So humans and other hominids is very short and kind of S-curved. All right, the second bolded term on the right column, page 73, is the symphysis pubis or the pubis symphysis or the pubic symphysis. They're all correct. So that's on the interior side of the pelvis, and that's when the pubic bones come together. So symphysis means joining. So like a symphony is when a bunch of musicians join together in like an orchestra, right? So this is when two pubic bones come together and make music. I'm just joking. That was terrible. So symphysis pubis or pubis symphysis, and that's where it's the interior side of the pelvis when the right os coxa's pubic bone joins with the left os coxa's pubic bone with cartilage in the center. And this cartilage is fairly soft. And when, for example, if this in adult females who get pregnant, it allows the pelvis to widen to accommodate giving birth to an infant. So that's the symphysis pubis, also called the pubic symphysis, same thing. In the book, it's called symphysis pubis, so we'll just go with that. So right underneath it, I label it number 3, is the ischial tuberosity. So if ischial, thinking that sounds like the ischium, you're right. So the ischial tuberosity is the bottom or distal end of the ischium. So this whole structure here is the ischium, in between the acetabulum where the femur goes into and the pubic symphysis. So this whole triangular area is the ischium. So the tuberosity is the distal and inferior side of the ischium. And those are your sit bones in common English. And it's called ischial tuberosity. After that is another term called the obturator foramen. Do you remember what foramen means? Remember the foramen magnum on the inferior side of a human skull where the vertebral column articulates? Yeah. So obturator foramen, obturator is, I can't remember what that means, but foramen means hole. It's these two triangular holes in it in a pelvis. So on screen, I have my finger in the left one, and they're in the middle of each ischium. So they're triangular holes in the middle of each ischium called the obturator foramen. So now I have my finger in the right obturator foramen of this pelvis. And the auricular surface, that seems to be the hardest one to remember, at least it was for me. The auricular surface is on the posterior side of the pelvis. So I'm going to rotate it now. So you see the posterior side of the pelvis facing the camera, and it's at the sacroiliac joint. So this is a sacrum, right? Sacroiliac joint, and this is the ilium. So it's where the ilium articulates with the sacrum. And if I could pull this apart, it would be really rough. And that's called the auricular surface, auricular surface. So auricular surface. So now I just went over all the features of the pelvis. So let's just check out the lab manual again, and it asks you to do something. It says at the bottom of page 74, what view? And what view? So what view is the left os coxa on the left side of the page, and what view is the right drawing on the right side of the page? So the left side of the page, how do you know which os coxa it is? Well, I recommend, if you're given an os coxa, and if you be in my in-person class, this would be on, quiz 3. I just put os coxa down and go, okay, which one is it? First landmark you want to look for, or feature, if you will, is the acetabulum. The acetabulum is that crater depression, crater-shaped depression where the femoral head goes into. And so I'm holding this pelvis in the camera, and I have my finger in this crater depression called the acetabulum. That is always that will always be on the lateral side of the pelvis. So if I hold the pelvis, let me rotate it so you see the anterior side of the pelvis, lateral is the sides going outward. So if I hold it this way, it's the lateral side. Now you want to know which is the front and which is the back. So which is the interior of the pelvis and which is the posterior side of this os coxa, if you will, like on the bottom of page 74. Well, the interior side is triangle shape, and it has the obturator foramen. The posterior side is kind of rough shape, and it has an auricular surface if you're looking at it medially. If you're looking at it laterally, like you are now in the camera, it just looks smooth. So look for the obturator foramen, and that's always the front, always the interior side. So let's go check out this lab manual, and all right. So look for the obturator foramen. I don't see it there on the left side of the page. So I'm going to do the bottom right of the page, and there is the obturator foramen right there. So we know that's the lateral side. Now look for the triangular shape of that hole right in the ischium or bottom part of the os coxa. Yep. And that in the little triangle of bone, and that is the interior side. Okay. Another way so that's the front. Another clue to find the back of it, or the posterior side of the os coxa, looking at it on the lateral side, is that look for that sciatic notch. And there it is. So the sciatic notch and the auricular surface are both on the posterior side of the os coxa. The pubis is always on the interior side of the os coxa. So what view of the os coxa is this? Is this the right or the left? Is it the lateral or the medial? Remember the acetabulum, which is this, looks like a crater, is always the lateral. So the answer is it's the lateral view. Okay. How about let's go to the right side of this piece of paper. Now I have it shaded. Can you see the acetabulum? You cannot. So you know you're looking at it from the medial or inside looking outside. So that is the medial view. Okay, so that's the medial view on the bottom left of page 74. Now, is it the right os coxa or the left? Well, let's find the front part. Look for the triangular bone or the pubis. There it is. That's always the front. Now the back, you can see the sciatic notch. And if you can't see that, you can see that jagged bone that connects to the sacrum called the auricular surface. And we could see that. So if this is the front and this is the back, and we're looking outward, right, at the medial side, then we know that this is a left os coxa on the bottom of the page that's highlighted on the screen right now. And then on the bottom of the page, on the right side of the bottom page, it's the left os coxa looking at it at the lateral side of it. So they're both left os coxas, or it's a left os coxa at the medial view at the left side of the page, your left, and it's a left os coxa on the lateral view on the bottom right of the page. And there you go. All right, the last thing is that you should know for quiz 3 is how do you tell or how do you attribute biological sex to a pelvis? So I'm going to head off to my slides here. I shared screens and let's go look at a pelvis. So on the screen is a quick review of the superior view of a pelvis. It's superior because you can kind of see the the big pelvic inlet, if you will. All right. The next screen has a drawing of the major parts of the human pelvis. On this screen is number 1 is the sacrum. Number 2 is the os coxa, and the 3 parts of the os coxa. Ilium, which is number 2 in the chart, and it's turquoise. The ischium, which is number 3 in the chart, and it's brown. And the pubis, which is number 4 in the chart, and it's violet. The pubic symphysis, also known as the symphysis pubis, is number 5 on the screen. The acetabulum, this is where the femur articulates with the pelvis, is number 6 on the screen. The obturator foramen is that triangular triangular shaped hole in the ischium, and it's number 7 in the screen. The ischium is where your sit bones are, right? And then number 8 on the screen is our internal tailbone called the coccyx, C-O-C-C-Y-X. So the pelvis hip bones, ilia for plural, are initially made up of 3 parts when a person is born. The top part is the ilium, the sit bones is ischium, and the front interior is the pubis. At birth, these 3 components are separated by a hyaline cartilage. They join each other in a Y-shaped portion of cartilage in the acetabulum. By the end of puberty, the 3 regions will have fused together into one single os coxa on the right and another single os coxa on the left. By the age of 25, they will be totally ossified. All right. How do you attribute sex by non-metric analysis of the pelvis? By non-metric, I mean by not taking any indices or anything, just not measuring anything, just looking at it. So here are the main ways to attribute sex. First, I'll show an interior view of a male pelvis and a female pelvis. So males have typically a narrow, long sciatic notch. It's harder to see the sciatic notch on the interior view, so let me switch to the next screen to the lateral view of a female and a male pelvis. So remember, the sciatic notch is always on the posterior side. So this is the back of the pelvis where my mouse is, my arrow is. And notice how wide and rounded the sciatic notch is of the female compared to the male, which is narrow. Okay, so that's the first way. So look for the sciatic notch. If it's wide, it's a female. If it's narrow, it's a male. The next thing to look for is the females have a broader pubic arch. So this is where that pubic symphysis or symphysis pubis, where the both pubic bones come together with that little cartilage in the center. On females, it's greater than 90 degrees. On males, it's more narrow than 90 degrees. So females, it's greater than 90 degrees. All right, so females typically have a wider pelvic outlet to accommodate birth canal. And looking at, and there is diversity, male and female, female pelvises are different, but typically females, I would describe it as kind of a rounder heart shape. And male inlet is more of like a spade, like ace of spades shape. So it's more narrow. So in summary, one, look for the sciatic notch. Males have a narrow sciatic notch and each side is parallel. So it's like a long, narrow U. And females have a wide, rounded parabola sciatic notch, number one. Number two, look at the pubic arch. Females have a pubic arch of around 90 degrees or greater. Males have a pubic arch that are more narrow, less than 90 degrees. And number three, look at the pelvic inlet. Typically, the pelvic inlet for females are like a wide heart, and the pelvic inlet for males are more narrow. Now I'm going to show you two pelvi. Here's my little female pelvis. So one, the sciatic notch is rounded and the edges are not parallel. They're drifting away from each other like a parabola shape, similar to the dental arcade. Number two, the sciatic notch is greater than 90 degrees, right? It's not a right angle, so it's wide. And then the pelvic inlet is like a rounded heart shape, typically. Here's the male pelvis. Number one, the sciatic notch is a little bit more narrow compared to female. The pubic arch is less than 90 degrees on the male. And the pelvic inlet is a more narrow heart shape. I will hold. In my left hand, I have the female pelvis. In the right, I have the male. So you can kind of see the pelvic inlet. I'm going to rotate it to the anterior view. You can see the pubic arch, the females in my left hand, males in my right. And then I'm going to rotate it to the lateral view, and the females in my left hand. So the pubic arch is wider than the males. Yeah. So typically, you could say that you can attribute sex using a pelvis, if all you have left of the skeleton is a pelvis, with around 98 degrees of certainty for biological males and females. And there you go. So I think we covered everything. Exploring the pelvis, the difference between a male and female pelvis. Oh, shoot. Page 75. It just never ends. I'm so sorry. One more. Okay. So let's go to Canvas. And all right. So on page 75, fill in the boxes with the following measurements. Coxa pelvis, label and side of body. So this is a female left. So I measured an os coxa, left female os coxa. The ilium breadth, B-R-E-A-D-T-H means width, same thing. Why don't they just say width? I don't know. I didn't write this manual. So ilium breadth is 128 millimeters. So write that in your lab manual. Ilium height, 103 millimeters. So write that in your lab manual, where that box that says ilium height. And now you're going to calculate the breath height ratio, or in other words, the ilium index or iliac index on page 75 using the measurements above. So you take your ilium breath. This / means divided by, okay? So ilium breath, which is 128 millimeters, divided by ilium height, 103 millimeters, equals a certain amount, and you multiply that by 100, which comes to an index number, and you can figure that out. And then you're done. There's no study questions for lab 7. Just review the bones. Here are at the bottom of the Canvas assignment some links to help you quiz yourself on the bones, on postcranial bones. So there we go. If you want to do a scapula, it has different, that's the ventral side of the scapula, or the side interior of the body, the dorsal side of the scapula, for example, and that's welcome to the bone box link. Another link is postcranial axle skeleton. It's a video made by Dr. Brian Pearson here at Pierce College. It's 31 minutes long. He made it last year. Just the major bones of the postcranial skeleton. And then I have some Quizlet flashcards. So if you want to, go to the next flashcard, what are those? That's the cervical vertebrae. Yeah, so the quiz 3, you want to know the 3 different types of vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae are the vertebrae of the neck. Thoracic vertebrae are the 12 vertebrae that connect to your ribs, your 12 pairs of ribs. The lumbar vertebrae are the 5 vertebrae that are at your waist. Whoop. And you can just click on these cards to quiz yourself. The sacrum is at the terminus of the vertebral column. It's also part of the pelvis. There you go. And I think that's it. I think we're good. All right. If you have any questions, please send me an email using the Canvas inbox, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours on a weekday. And then just this weekend is the holiday weekend coming up. So I have quiz 3 due on July 3rd on Saturday. But if you don't get it done, I'm going to leave it open until Tuesday, the day after the Independence Day holiday weekend. So that's it. All right. Take care, guys.